The void between stars was never truly silent. Commander Vorgul of the Vorthak Dominion knew this better than most. His claws flexed against the command throne's armrests as the Stormfang, his battle cruiser, drifted through the graveyard of his own fleet. The wreckage stretched for thousands of kilometers. Twisted metal, shattered hulls, and the faint, fading pulses of dying power cores. The silver, purple glow of Vorthak technology, once a symbol of invincibility, now flickered like embers in the dark. His secondary heart pounded in his chest, a biological echo of the dread coiling in his gut. This was not supposed to happen. The Stormfang's sensors painted the devastation in brutal detail. The Dusk Rend, the Div Iron Maw, the Avoy Claw, all reduced to scrap. Their once impenetrable armor, forged from military-grade alloys and layered with reactive shielding, had been torn apart. Not melted, not breached, torn, as if something had simply willed them to come undone. Commander Gromnak, his chief scientist, approached with the hesitant gait of a predator who had just realized it was prey. His violet ocular implants flickered as he processed the data. The damage patterns, they don't match any known weapon signatures, not even the Keldarian singularity cannons. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. Then what does it match? Gromnak hesitated. Nothing. Or rather, nothing's modern. A cold ripple passed through the command deck. The Vorthak Dominion had ruled this sector for centuries. Their technology was unmatched, their fleets undefeated. They had crushed rebellions, glassed worlds, and silenced entire civilizations before they could even scream. And yet, here they were. Vorgul's gaze locked onto the single anomaly in the wreckage, a drifting, jagged fragment of something elsy. A hull plate, but not Vorthak, too angular, too brutal in its design. Its edges were scorched, yes, but intact, and etched into its surface, barely visible beneath the carbon scoring, was a single word in blocky, archaic script INDOMITABLE. Gromnak's voice was barely a whisper. The beacons. The ancient warnings. They spoke of them. Vorgul's spines flattened against his back. The old legends, the ones even the Dominion dismissed as superstition. Tales of a blue world, quarantined by the ancients, where something feral slept, a species that had not yet reached the stars, but carried the potential to burn them. A proximity alert blared. The Stormfang's tactical display lit up with new contacts, dozens of them. No, hundreds. Emerging from the dark like ghosts. Vorgul's blood ran cold. They were sleek. They were wrong. Their hulls were black as the void itself, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Their weapon arrays were not elegant, not refined, just functional. And at their center, a single ship, larger than the rest, its prow scarred but unbroken. The same word gleamed on its flank. INDOMTILE. Gromnak's voice cracked. They weren't sleeping. Vorgul's claws dug into the throne. They were waiting. And now, the Vorthak Dominion would learn why the galaxy had feared them. The Stormfang's bridge was silent, save for the low hum of its failing shields. Vorgul's secondary heart thrummed in his chest, a rapid, instinctive rhythm that hadn't pulsed like this since his first battle. The human fleet hung in the void before them, motionless, yet radiating a quiet, predatory menace. They were not arranged in the orderly formations of the Dominion. No, their ships drifted in loose clusters, asymmetrical, unpredictable, like a pack of hunters circling prey. Gromnak's talons trembled over the sensor console. His neural crest, usually a proud violet, had dulled to a sickly gray. Their energy signatures, they don't match any known propulsion system. It's as if they're cheating physics. Vorgul didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the indomitable. The human flagship was a scarred Leviathan, its hull pitted with the remnants of 1,000 battles. Unlike Dominion warships, which gleamed with polished alloys and precise geometric lines, this vessel was a patchwork of brutal functionality. Armor plating had been welded over old wounds, weapons bolted onto any available surface, and across its flank, in jagged, defiant lettering, Someone had painted a single phrase, FIRST Royal of Warwine, a warning, a promise. The tactical display flickered as the human fleet shifted. Not in unison. Not with the rigid discipline of the Dominion's battle formations, but organically, fluidly, as if each ship moved on its own instinct. And then, without ceremony, they struck. The first railgun round punched through the Stormfang's forward shields like they weren't even there. The impact sent a shudder through the deck, throwing Vorgul against his throne. Alarms wailed as secondary explosions rippled through the lower decks. Gromnock's voice was a strangled hiss. They're kinetics. They're firing slugs at relativistic speeds. No one uses. Another impact. The bridge lights flickered. Vorgul snarled, his claws digging deeper into the armrests. This wasn't warfare as the Dominion understood it. No elegant plasma lances, no calculated shield-draining volleys. The humans fought like beasts, brutal, unrestrained, say efficient. A third impact. The Stormfang's primary reactor groaned in protest. Then, the comms crackled to life, a voice, human female, calm in a way that made Vorgul's spine stiffen. Vorthak vessel, Stormfang. This is Major Victoria Reynolds of the Terran Navy. A pause. You are trespassing in sovereign space. Gromnock's frills flared in disbelief. Sovereign. They don't even have colonies beyond their system. Vorgul ignored him. His eyes were locked on the viewscreen, where the IR's Indomitable's forward batteries were charging, not with the clean silver, purple of Dominion plasma, but with something darker. Something that IS wreathed. The human's voice came again, softer now. Almost pitying. Surrender, or don't. Either way, this ends now. The was Indomitable fired. And Vorgul learned the first rule of war. The universe shattered. Vorgul had witnessed the fury of Dominion plasma cannons, the surgical precision of Krellian singularity projectors. But this was something else. The Indomitable's weapon didn't fire so much as unleash a torrent of blackened energy that twisted space itself, leaving jagged afterimages burned into the Stormfang's optical relays. The beam struck not like a blade, but like a hammer, an impact so visceral the deck plates screamed beneath Vorgul's boots. Alarms shrieked. The Stormfang's shields, engineered to disperse and dissipate energy attacks, did nothing. The beam clawed through them, as if the very concept of shielding was an insult to its existence. Gromnock's voice was a strangled hiss. Impossible! Their weapon, it's not just bypassing our defenses, it's eating them. Vorgul saw it in the readouts. The human weapon wasn't merely overpowering the Stormfang's shields. It was consuming them, siphoned into the writhing darkness of the beam like fuel. The energy signatures spiked erratically, then flatlined as the last of the shield matrix collapsed. The Indomitable didn't pause. Secondary batteries roared to life. A staggered volley of railgun slugs that punched through the Stormfang's armor with contemptuous ease. Each impact sent tremors through the hull, the sound of rending metal a grotesque counterpoint to the human vessel's silent, predatory advance. Vorgul's claws dug into the command console. This wasn't warfare as the Dominion understood it. No measured exchanges. No tactical withdrawals. The humans fought like they had nothing to lose. Because he realized with dawning horror, they didn't. The Stormfang was bleeding atmosphere now, silver, purple coolant venting into the void like arterial spray. Gromnock scrambled at the sensor array, his frills flicking in frantic denial. Their ship, Captain, their ship has no shields! Vorgul's blood ran cold. He turned to the tactical display, expecting to see the telltale shimmer of barrier technology around the Indomitable. There was nothing, no energy dispersion, no defensive matrix, just bare, brutal armor, scarred and pitted from countless battles. The humans didn't use these shields. They didn't need them. A fresh impact rocked the bridge. The main view screen flickered, then resolved into a close range feed of the Indomitable's hull and the swarm of boarding pods detaching from its underbelly. Gromnock made a sound like a dying engine. They're coming inside. Vorgul had faced borders before. Pirates, mercenaries, even rogue Krellian assassins. But these weren't raiders. These weren't even soldiers. The first pod impacted near the Stormfang's ventral hangar, its outer shell splitting open like a seed pod. What emerged wasn't a boarding party. It was of plague. Human figures clad in blackened armor surged forward, their movements too fast, too fluid. Their helmets were featureless, their weapons humming with the same vile energy as the Indomitable's main cannon. They moved in perfect silence, no war cries, no chatter, just the methodical, unstoppable advance of predators who had done this 1,000 times before. And at their head, a single figure, taller than the rest, its armor etched with crimson sigils. It turned its helmet toward a security cam, and for a heartbeat, Vorgul swore it looked at him through the feed. Then the screen went dark. Gromnak was hyperventilating. We have to surrender. We's have to. Vorgul didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the tactical display, where the Indomitable's weapons were cycling again. The humans hadn't come to take prisoners. They'd come to send a message. And as the Stormfang's hull began to buckle, Vorgul understood, at last, why the ancient beacons had warned of Terra. Some things, once awakened, could never be put back to sleep. The Stormfang's command deck was a tomb of flickering screens and dying light. The air stank of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the scent of a warship bleeding out in the void. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne, the alloy groaning under his grip. His secondary heart pounded in sync with the distant, rhythmic thuds of boarding pods, embedding themselves deeper into the hull. They had minutes, maybe less. Gromnak's trembling fingers danced over the comms panel. His frills flushed a sickly violet. The distress signal. It's not getting through. The humans are jamming everything. His voice cracked. They don't want anyone to hear us scream. Vorgul didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the tactical holodisplay, where the Indomitable loomed like a specter. It wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. Every line of its brutal architecture, every pulse of its silver, purple energy cores, screamed of a species that had clawed its way to the stars through fire and blood. And now, it was coming for of them. A proximity alert blared, another boarding pod, this one slamming into the ventral decks. Its Stormfang shuddered, its structural integrity collapsing in slow, inevitable increments. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He had fought pirates, insurgents, even the merciless Cathari swarm. But this was different. The humans didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like storms. A new transmission flickered to life on the main screen. Not a distress call, not a surrender demand. A broadcast. The image resolved into a human face. Female, pale skin, dark eyes that burned with a cold, unwavering intensity. Her uniform was black, adorned with crimson insignia, the fabric clinging to her like a second skin. Behind her, the bridge of the Indomitable stretched, a cathedral of war, bathed in the eerie glow of tactical displays. Vorthak vessel, Stormfang. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. This is Major Victoria Reynolds of the Terran Naval Defense Corps. You have violated sovereign human space. You have ignored our warnings. A pause. The silence was worse than any threat. Now, she said, you will learn why. The screen split. A second feed appeared, real-time footage from the Stormfang's own security cams. The corridors were alight with muzzle flashes, the walls painted in the violet ichor of fallen Vorthak warriors. And moving through the carnage, unstoppable, inevitable. The AXO. Troopers. Their armor absorbed light, their movements too precise, too as inhuman. They didn't sprint, they didn't hesitate, they advanced like a force of nature, cutting down anything that stood in their way. One of them paused, turned its helmet toward the camera. And then the feed cut to black. Gromnak made a sound like a dying animal. They're hurting us. They want us to see. Vorgul's blood ran cold. He understood now, this wasn't just an attack. It was a demonstration. The humans weren't just destroying the Stormfang. They were recording it. For the galaxy to see, the comms panel lit up again. A new transmission. This one encrypted, pulsing with the telltale signature of a deep space relay. Vorgul hesitated, then opened it. A single line of text scrolled across the screen, translated into Vorthak script with chilling precision. Tell them what you saw. Outside, the EV Indomitable's main cannon flared to life once more. And the Stormfang's fate was sealed. The F Stormfang shuddered as the Indomitable's final salvo carved through its last remaining shield generator. The impact sent a metallic scream reverberating through the corridors, the sound of a dying beast bleeding atmosphere into the void. Vorgul's claws dug into the command console, his secondary eyelids flicking shut against the emergency strobes that painted the bridge in jagged pulses of violet and red. They had minutes, maybe less. The humans weren't just content to cripple them. They were coming out inside. Gromnock's frills were clamped tight against his skull, his voice a rasp. They're locking onto our ventral airlocks. They're boarding pods. They're not standard breaching rigs. Scanners show modular payloads. Vorgul didn't need the scientist to elaborate. Had seen the footage, the way those armored figures moved, the way they hunted. Seal the bulkheads, he snarled. Activate the internal defense grid. If they want this ship, they'll take it corpse by corpse. The order was futile, and he knew it. The Stormfang's security protocols were designed to repel Vorthak raiders, not this. Not creatures who fought like they were born in the dark between stars. The first breach came not with explosions, but with silence. The outer airlock hissed open, no plasma torch, no shaped charge. Just a whisper of hydraulics as the human boarding pod unfolded itself, its armored plates retracting like the petals of some grotesque mechanical flower. Inside, shadows moved, then the lights died. Not just in the corridor, not just in the adjacent decks. Everywhere. Not as the Stormfang's internal systems winked out in a wave, swallowed by an invasive darkness that rolled through the ship like a tide. Emergency lumens stuttered, then failed. Even the faint hum of the life support faded into nothingness. Gromnock's console spat static. They've hacked our core network. Not just overridden it, rewritten it. The ship's architecture is theirs now. Vorgul's pulse hammered in his secondary arteries. This wasn't warfare, this was possession. Then the screaming started. The humans didn't use flashlights. They didn't need to. Their helmets glowed with a faint, sickly green hue, active targeting overlays painting the corridors in grids of lethal intent. Infrared, motion tracking, threat assessment algorithms that prioritized targets before the Vorthak even raised their weapons. And they moved on wrong, not in the frantic, adrenalized rush of boarding actions Vorgul had trained against. Not in the predictable patterns of cover and suppression. They advanced in perfect, unhurried synchrony, no wasted motion. No hesitation. A squad of Vorthak Marines ambushed them in the mess hall, firing from behind overturned tables. The humans didn't flinch. One raised its arm. A segmented launcher on its wrist clicked. The projectile detonated midair, scattering a cloud of microfilament wires that sliced through flesh and bone like monomolecular whips. The Marines came apart in wet, ragged pieces before their death shrieks even left their throats. The humans stepped over the remains, still advancing. Vorgul watched it all through the dying feeds of internal cameras. Watched as the invaders carved through his crew like farmers scything wheat. Watched as they ate, adapted. When the Vorthak set up barricades, the humans deployed incendiary gel that burned through bulkheads. When they flooded corridors with nerve gas, the humans simply stopped breathing for 7 minutes, their armored suits cycling some unholy reserve of oxygen. When the last defenders triggered the gravity plates to send them spinning into the ceilings, the humans magnetically anchored themselves to the deck and kept walking. Gromnock was hyperventilating now. His frills flared in primal terror. They're not just soldiers, They're machines. They've engineered themselves for this. Vorgul's claws flexed. He had one last option, the self-destruct. His hand hovered over the console. Then the door to the bridge exploded inward. The figure that stepped through the smoke wasn't a drone. Wasn't some faceless automaton, it was her. Major Victoria Reynolds. Her armor was streaked with Vorthak blood, the human sigils on her pauldrons glowing faintly in the gloom. She didn't aim her weapon. Didn't even look at the surviving bridge crew like they were threats. She looked at them like they were data. Then she spoke, not in the guttural bark of battlefield comms, but in perfect, unaccented Vorthak. Commander Vorgul, her voice was a blade wrapped in silk. You have a choice now. She tilted her helmet toward the viewscreen, where the Indomitable loomed like a specter. Die here, or tell the galaxy what you've seen. Outside, the Stormfang's hull groaned like a living thing in its death throes. And Vorgul understood, this was never about taking the ship. It was about taking him. The air inside the Stormfang's bridge tasted of scorched metal and ionized fear. Vorgul's secondary heart thrummed in erratic pulses, his claws flexing against the command console as he stared at the human. Major Reynolds didn't move, didn't flinch. Her armor was a testament to violence. Deep gouges scoring the blackened plating, the remnants of Vorthak pulse, fire still smoldering in the cracks. But beneath the damage, the sigils of her rank pulsed with a steady, eerie glow, as if the armor itself refused to acknowledge its wounds. Gromnock, the scientist, twitched beside him, his frills pressed flat against his skull in submission. The rest of the bridge crew had frozen, their limbs locked in instinctive paralysis. They had seen the drones, the boarding pods, the way human soldiers moved through the corridors like shadows given teeth. But this was worse, because she was looking at them. Not as enemies, not as prey, as witnesses. Vorgul's gaze flicked to the viewscreen. The Indomitable hung there silent and monstrous, its hull a patchwork of scars. Old battle damage layered beneath fresh wounds, each one a story of defiance. It wasn't the sleek, polished terror of Vorthak dreadnoughts. It was something uglier, something that had been broken and reforged too many times to count. And yet it still flew, still fought. Reynolds followed his stare. You see it, don't you? Her voice was quiet, almost conversational. The difference between our ships and yours. Vorgul's mandibles tightened. He did. The Vorthak built their vessels to intimidate. Gleaming silver, purple alloys, harsh angular lines, weapons arrays designed to scream dominance before a single shot was fired. The Indomitable didn't bother with intimidation. Its earned, its fear. Every scar on its hull was a battle survived. Every patch of welded armor, a lesson learned in blood. It wasn't just a warship, it was a record. A living testament to the human's refusal to die. Reynolds turned back to him, her helmet tilting slightly. Your people keep asking why we fight the way we do. She gestured to the screen. That's why. A low groan shuddered through the Stormfang's superstructure as another section of the hull gave way. Alarms wailed, their shrill cries cutting through the silence. Gromnock finally found his voice. You let us board you. The realization dripped from his words like poison. You've wanted us to see. Reynolds didn't deny it. Vorgul's blood ran cold. This wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. The humans hadn't just defeated them. They had studied them. Learned their tactics, their weaknesses, and now they were sending a message. Carved into the wreckage of his ship and seared into the minds of his crew. This is what happens when you wake the giants. Outside, the Indomitable's engines flared, its thrusters burning violet in the dark. And Vorgul knew, with a dread that settled deep into his bones, that the galaxy would never be the same. The Stormfang's bridge flickered in and out of darkness, its silver, purple consoles spitting erratic arcs of energy as the ship's dying power core struggled to maintain cohesion. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne, the metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart pounded in his chest, a rapid, alien rhythm that mirrored the chaos unfolding around him. The human warship loomed outside the shattered viewport, its armored hull glinting like a predator's teeth in the void. It wasn't just a vessel, it was a statement. Every reinforced plate, every weapon emplacement, every scar from previous battles spoke of a species that had clawed its way up from the dirt of a death world, and Sever refused to kneel. Gronok's trembling hands hovered over the tactical display, the holographic projection wavering as the Stormfang's systems failed. Their armor, it's not just layered. It's adaptive, he muttered, his voice hollow. The more we hit it, the more it learns. Their engineers must have engineered our own shield harmonics, and Vorgul silenced him with a glare. It didn't matter now, the humans had played them like fools. A proximity alert blared. Another human vessel, smaller but no less lethal, had detached from theirs Indomitable and was closing fast. Its design was sleek, predatory, its thrusters burning a deep crimson against the black. A boarding craft, Vorgul's mandibles twitched. They weren't done with him yet. Captain David Kim moved through the Stormfang's corridors like a ghost, his combat boots silent against the deck. The alien ship's architecture was all brutal angles and cold metallic hues, the walls lined with pulsing violet conduits that hummed with fading energy. His HUD flickered, tagging heat signatures ahead, Vorthak survivors, regrouping. He wanted them to see this. His squad moved with him, their armored forms a seamless extension of his will. They had trained for this moment, not just for the fight, but for the messaging. The Vorthak had come expecting prey. Instead, they found wolves. A door hissed open ahead, revealing a barricade of alien warriors, their carapace armor glinting under emergency lighting. Their weapons, serrated energy blades and plasma casters, were raised, their postures rigid with the disciplined fury of a species that had never known defeat. Kim didn't slow, his rifle barked once. Twice, two Vorthak collapsed, their chests ruptured by hypervelocity rounds. The others barely had time to react before his squad was among them, a blur of motion and violence. A blade flashed. Kim sidestepped, grabbed the warrior's wrist, and he twisted. The sound of snapping chitin was drowned out by the roar of gunfire. One of his men went down, a plasma bolt searing through his shoulder. Kim didn't pause. He lunged forward, driving his combat knife into the nearest Vorthak's throat, twisting until the alien's violet blood slicked his gauntlets. The last warrior standing hesitated, just for a second. Kim shot him between the eyes. Vorgul felt it before he saw it. The shudder through the deck as the humans breached the final bulkhead. The bridge doors exploded inward in a hail of shrapnel, the acrid stench of burning metal flooding the air. And then, he stepped through. Kim's armor was scarred, his visor smeared with alien blood, but his posture was relaxed, almost casual, like this was just another day. Vorgul rose from his throne, his spines flaring in defiance. "You came to die, human." Kim tilted his head. "No," he said, his voice calm. "I came to show you what happens when you wake the giants." And then the other's Indomitable's main cannon fired. The world turned white. Vorgul had just enough time to realize this wasn't a defeat. It was an education. The bridge of the Storm's maw was a ruin of molten metal and flickering violet energy. This Indomitable's final strike had carved through the Vorthak flagship like a god's blade, shearing through bulkheads and reducing entire decks to slag. Yet, by some cruel twist of fate, Vorgul still lived. His carapace was cracked, leaking ichor from a dozen wounds, and his left arm hung limp, seared to the bone by the backwash of the human weapon. The air stank of scorched flesh and burning circuits. The once pristine command throne, now a twisted wreck. Around him, his warriors lay broken, their spines snapped, their bodies half melted. But Vorgul was not dead, and that meant the fight was not over. He dragged himself through the wreckage, his claws scraping against the deck. The storm's maw was dying. He could feel it in the shuddering groans of the hull, the way the gravity plates flickered, sending loose debris drifting in erratic arcs. The humans had not just crippled his ship. They had gutted it. A low, guttural sound escaped his throat. Not pain, not rage. Understanding. The beacons had been right. Terra was not just a world, it was a tomb, and the humans were the sleeping monsters buried within. Gromnak found him near the secondary escape pods. His body slumped against the wall, his breath ragged. The scientist's own injuries were severe. One of his secondary eyes was a ruined mess, and his carapace was streaked with burns. But he still moved with purpose. "High Commander," he rasped, his voice modulator glitching. "The core is destabilizing, we have minutes." Vorgul did not answer at first. His gaze was fixed on the flickering holoscreen nearby, where the Indomitable loomed like a specter. The human warship was turning now, its monstrous silhouette blotting out the stars as it prepared to finish what it had started. "They let us live," Vorgul finally growled. Gromnak hesitated. "What?" "They've let us live." Vorgul's claws flexed, gouging the metal beneath him. "That final shot, it could have vaporized us." But they held back. Why? The answer came to him before Gromnak could speak. "Because they want us to run." Because they want us to tell the others." The realization was a blade in his gut. This was not mercy. It was a message. A warning, and Vorgul would deliver it. The escape pod shuddered as it launched, the magnetic rails hurling it clear of the dying warship. Through the narrow viewport, Vorgul watched as the storm's maw collapsed in on itself, its core finally succumbing to the catastrophic overload. The explosion was silent in the void, a bloom of violet fire that consumed everything. His warriors, his pride, his certainty of Vorthak's supremacy. Gromnak was murmuring something, prayers, perhaps, or curses. Vorgul did not care, his mind was elsewhere. On the Indomitable, on the human standing at its helm, on the words Kim had spoken before the end. "I came to show you what happens when you wake the giants." Vorgul exhaled, his breath fogging the glass. The galaxy had thought humanity weak, fragile, a species of divided tribes, squabbling over scraps. But now he knew the truth, humans were not weak. They were patient, and they had been waiting for this moment for a very, very long time. The escape pod drifted through the wreckage, like a corpse caught in a tide of shattered metal. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests, the only sign of the storm raging beneath his stoic exterior. Outside, the remnants of the storm's maw spun lazily, twisted spars of dark steel glowing molten at the edges where plasma fires still licked at the void. The human weapon had not just destroyed his ship, it had unmade it, peeling apart the armored layers like the skin of a fruit, before detonating the core in a final, contemptuous gesture. Gromnak's breathing was ragged, his four eyes darting across the debris field, as if expecting another attack. The scientist had never seen battle before today. None of them had, not like this. The Vorthak Dominion had waged war for centuries, but always against fractured systems, compliant species, enemies who broke before the first volley. This had been different. The humans had not broken. They had answered. Vorgul's mandibles twitched as the pod's sensors flickered, casting jagged silver, purple light across his scarred face. The Indomitable was still out there, a shadow against the distant stars, its monstrous silhouette wreathed in the cold glow of its own engines. It made no move to pursue them. That, more than anything, carved into Vorgul's pride like a monomolecular blade. They were not worth hunting. A warning chime sounded, proximity alert. Gromnak flinched, but Vorgul did not react. He knew what it was before the scanners confirmed it. The drifting corpses of his warriors. Some were intact, their armored carapaces still gleaming under the starlight. Others were little more than scorched fragments, limbs frozen in the agonized contortions of their final moments. The Dominion would call this a tragedy. A miscalculation. Vorgul knew better. This was a EV lesson. His mind replayed the battle in brutal flashes, the way the human railguns had torn through their forward shields, as if they were mist. The sickening lurch of the deck as the Indomitable's boarding drones ripped through bulkheads with mechanical precision. And then there had been Kim. The human captain had moved like something not entirely mortal. His armor blackened and cracked, but his stance unbroken, his voice steady even as the ship groaned around them. "You should have listened to the beacons." Gromnak finally broke the silence. "High Commander, the distress signal has been acknowledged. A retrieval vessel will reach us within the cycle." Vorgul did not respond. His gaze remained fixed on the wreckage, on the twisted remains of the Dominion's might. Somewhere in that graveyard was his war scythe, the ancestral weapon that had never known defeat, until today. The humans had taken that from him too, but they had given him something in return. Understanding. The galaxy had whispered of Terra's sleeping giants for millennia. Ancient ruins bore warnings in dead languages, carvings of figures wreathed in fire and steel. The Vorthak had dismissed them as myth. Now, Vorgul knew the truth. The humans had not forgotten their old wars. They had not grown soft in their isolation. They had waited, honing their fury into something precise, something patient. And when the Dominion had come, when they had burned human colonies and laughed at their defiance, the giants had finally opened their eyes. Gromnak shifted uncomfortably. What do we tell the High Synod?" Vorgul exhaled slowly, his breath frosting the viewport once more. Outside, the last embers of the storm's maw flickered and died. "The truth," he said at last. "That we were wrong." The silence in the storm's maw's ruined command chamber was absolute. Vorgul's claws flexed against the cracked console, the last remnants of his ship's silver, purple energy flickering in dying arcs across the deck. The scent of scorched metal and ionized plasma hung thick in the air, a funeral shroud for the once proud vessel. His third heart, the one reserved for war pride, beat weakly in his chest. He had thought he understood war. The Vorthak Dominion had forged its empire in fire, their brutalist warships carving through lesser species with contemptuous ease. Their technology was unmatched, dark steel and violet, edged weaponry, the pinnacle of military efficiency. They had laughed at the warnings etched in dead ruins, at the whispers of Terra's wrath. Now, the laughter was ash in his throat. Gromnak stood beside him, his spines flattened in submission, his data, claw trembling as it scrolled through the wreckage reports. The scientist had spent cycles dismissing human tactics as crude, their ships as fragile things held together by desperation. But desperation, it seemed, was a sharper weapon than any alloy. Outside the fractured viewport, the battlefield stretched in a graveyard of Dominion steel. The human fleet moved among the wreckage with terrifying precision. Their vessels, 2,000 Indomitable, class dreadnoughts, the survivors had called them, were unlike anything the Vorthak had faced. Not sleek, not elegant, but functional. Every angle, every weapon mount, spoke of a design philosophy honed in 1,000 wars. Their armor was layered, adaptive, shrugging off plasma lances that should have gutted them. Their railguns fired not with the clean efficiency of Vorthak technology, but with a av roar, as if each shot carried the fury of the species that built them. And then there were the boarding pods. Vorgul's mandibles clenched at the memory. The humans hadn't just destroyed his fleet. They had hunted his crews. Cybernetic shock troops clad in blackened exo plating, their optics glowing like embers in the dark. They fought not with the disciplined formations of the Dominion, but with a feral, terrifying coordination. As if each soldier was an extension of some greater will. Gromnak's voice was hollow. Their technology, it should not be possible. Vorgul exhaled, watching his breath fog the cold glass. Possible. That was the heart of it. The Dominion had measured the humans by their own standards, by the cold logic of superior firepower and unbreakable shields. But humanity had never played by those rules. They had taken the lessons of their bloody history and forged them into something the galaxy had forgotten how to fear. A chime echoed through the ruined bridge, an incoming transmission. The holodisplay flickered, resolving into the face of a human officer. Major Victoria Reynolds, her insignia declared. Her expression was not the gloating triumph of a conqueror, nor the cold disdain of a superior force. It was something worse. "Commander Vorgul," she said, her voice steady. "Your fleet is gone. Your flagship is dead in the void. You have two choices." She didn't need to say them. Gromnak made a low, desperate sound. Vorgul did not move. He had thought himself a warrior. Now he understood he had only ever been a soldier. And the humans, they had never stopped fighting. "Tell your High Synod," Reynolds said, her gaze unflinching, "that Terra remembers its enemies." The transmission cut. Outside, the human fleet turned its guns toward the next Dominion stronghold. Vorgul closed his eyes. The lesson, at last, was learned. The silence that followed the transmission was thicker than the void outside the shattered viewports. Vorgul stood motionless, his claws curled into fists so tight the joints ached. The bridge around him was a graveyard of his own arrogance, sparking consoles, the acrid stench of melted alloy. The bodies of his crew slumped over their stations, like broken marionettes. Gromnak was the first to break the stillness. The scientist's frill, usually a vibrant display of confidence, hung limp against his skull. His voice was a whisper, barely audible over the groans of dying systems. They knew. Vorgul didn't respond. He didn't need to. The ancient beacons had been clear. Warnings carved into the ruins of dead civilizations, etched onto the bones of worlds that had dared challenge Terra. As sleeping giants. As do not wake them. The Dominion had scoffed. The Vorthak were the apex of war, the inheritors of 1,000 conquered species. What could one backwater world of hairless primates possibly do to them? Now, he knew the humans had not simply fought, they had unmated them. Vorgul's gaze drifted to the tactical display, frozen in its last update. The human fleet moved with terrifying precision. Their ships, fair monstrosities of layered armor and weapons that defied reason, carving through the remnants of his armada like a blade through flesh. The Seca's indomitable, their flagship, loomed among them, its silhouette a jagged promise of annihilation. He had thought their technology crude when first observed. Ballistics, explosives, simple kinetics. But the humans had taken those principles and sharpened them. Their railguns didn't just fire slugs, they fired the relativistic spears. Projectiles accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punching through shields and hulls as if they were parchment. Their missiles didn't just explode, they unfolded, releasing swarms of hunter-killer drones that sought out life signs with chilling efficiency. And their soldiers, Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He had seen the feeds from the boarding actions. The humans called them exo-troopers, but they were something else entirely. Not mere warriors, not even machines, they were vengeance given form, augmented beyond reason. Their bodies sheathed in armor that laughed at plasma fire, their limbs fitted with weapons that turned corridors into slaughterhouses. They moved like nightmares, unstoppable, inhuman in their focus. The transmission replayed in his mind, Major Reynolds' face. That pity, it was the final insult. The Dominion had come to teach these creatures their place. Instead, the humans had shown them the truth. The galaxy had as always been theirs. They had simply been waiting for someone foolish enough to remind them. Gromnak let out a shuddering breath. What do we tell the High Synod? Ars Vorgul exhaled, long and slow. The truth. Assert that they had ignored the warnings. That they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. That Terra remembered. And now, so would they. Outside, the human fleet burned toward the next stronghold. Vorgul closed his eyes. The lesson, at last, was learned. The command deck was silent, save for the low hum of failing systems and the distant, rhythmic thud of debris striking the hull. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his ruined throne, the metal groaning under the pressure. The Dominion's grand flagship, the Harbinger's Wrath, was now little more than a gutted carcass, drifting in the wake of the human advance. His warriors, those who still lived, stood motionless, their spines rigid with unspoken dread. They had been bred for conquest, engineered to feel nothing but the thrill of victory. Yet now, their eyes flickered with something unfamiliar. Not of death, the Vorthak did not fear death, but of understanding. The humans had not merely defeated them. They had unmade them, stripped away the illusion of supremacy, exposed the Dominion's might as nothing more than brittle arrogance. And worse, they had done it without hatred, without even as effort. That was what haunted him most. A chime sounded from the fractured holodisplay. The last functioning sensor array had locked onto the human fleet's trajectory. Vorgul forced himself to look. They were not heading for the nearest Dominion stronghold. They were bypassing it entirely. A cold realization settled in his chest. The humans were not waging a war of annihilation. They were carving a path straight to the heart of the Dominion, to the High Synod itself. And they would not stop, not until every last one of them heard the lesson. Vorgul exhaled, mandibles clicking softly. Prepare the broadcast. His second-in-command cars stiffened. To whom? Sis. To everyone. The words tasted like ash. The Dominion had spent centuries erasing weakness, purging doubt. But now, for the first time in their history, they would speak the truth. Not as conquerors, but as witnesses. The transmission would be sent uncoded, unfiltered, a raw pulse of data hurled into the void. Let the Synod hear it, let the vassal races hear it. Let the galaxy know. The humans were coming, and nothing would ever be the same. Outside, the stars burned cold and indifferent. Vorgul activated the feed and began to speak.